Okay, welcome back everybody. I'm Ryan with Omni Lucid Media, and this is the Black Art Paladin. So this is episode 3, and we're going to be talking about PTSD. So I've been watching. I feel like now we're really starting to get to the meat of everything, starting to get into more of the seriousness with talking about mental health aspects, and me telling you guys about my own personal stuff going on with it. I'll try and throw in maybe some facts and stuff to maybe make you guys have a little bit better understanding of some of these things. So uh, you know definitely hopefully you enjoy. So I'm just going to jump right into it. So with PTSD, if you've been watching since the beginning, this is what I talked about, that's where everything for me stems from, the depression and all that. So PTSD, again, started for me once I got back from Iraq. I was there from 2007 to the very beginning of 2009, and obviously, saw quite a few things that just, I guess, disturbing. That for better lack of a word, or just some pretty horrible stuff. And with that, so once I got back, and me being a medic too, so it's pretty much, my face was right in front of all of it. First thing, the bad stuff happened, and I go to see it firsthand. So with PTSD, mine was I guess, I don't know, be a I guess textbook diagnosis, where I had gotten back, and I didn't have any symptoms or any of that stuff going on when I first got back, but it started showing up about maybe 2.5 months, and I think the textbook, if you want to call it that, is right around the 3-month mark, where symptoms will start to show up after you're out of the stressful environment, or that situation, whatever it may be. And I should point out, so I'm obviously talking about from PTSD from military and from the Army aspect, but it is one of those that you can get PTSD from other things as well. But I'm going to obviously be focused on the military thing. So like I always say, if you have PTSD, just because this is the way that it came about for me, don't feel excluded, and you might have some of the same symptoms. And as always, if you're watching for family, friend, whoever, they may have some similar things going on as well, even if they don't have PTSD from the military. Back on track here. Just before 3 months is when the signs and symptoms and that started showing up. And what I mean by that, so I started noticing that I was getting more irritable. By definition, I'm usually a pretty easygoing person, pretty calm and collected in that. So I started noticing that I was getting more irritable, starting to have kind of the just explosive anger for usually pretty minor things, which is definitely just not in character for me. Then there was also started having severe insomnia. I wasn't sleeping at all. I'd usually maybe go to bed, and I'd be laying in bed for 6 to 8 hours, however long it was. I don't remember at this point, but in that 6 to 8 hour time frame, I'd be lucky if I got like maybe 15 minutes. And lots of just sadness, random sadness was creep up on me, and so to get into each of those, just to give you a little bit better idea. So once I got back, with the sleeping, I started noticing I wouldn't be able to sleep because my mind would be racing. Every time I would try and lay down and go to sleep, I'd start having images of, rather it was things that I saw. Some of it was stuff that I didn't see, but it was just scenarios that would play out. Whether it be that my friends were getting hurt. One that I recall that actually probably was a dream. I'm assuming it was a dream, unless it was a daydream of some sort. But that I was back home, and I kept having different scenarios play in my head, and it'd always be with a loved one. So one of them was my girlfriend at the time. You know, I was meeting her, and she was, or I'm sorry, I wasn't meeting her. We were walking down the street, and suddenly some men jumped out, and they were going to shoot us and attack us. And suddenly, in the dream, I just freeze, and it was like I was in a box, and I couldn't get out. So I just have to sit here and watch, you know, these men take off with my girlfriend. And as soon as it gets to that point where, you know, I feel absolutely helpless, you know, the dream, you know, changes. Next thing, the one where I was meeting someone was actually my brother. So I had this vision that me and my brother were meeting somewhere. He was crossing the street. I see that there's a car barreling at him, and you know, so I have plenty of time to get to him. And as soon as I go to take off to grab him or knock him out of the way, whatever I was going to do, same thing. I get stuck in this box, just a clear box, and all of a sudden, boom! I can't get out. You know, banging on the glass. I can't get out of this thing, and I just have to watch my brother get just run down by this car. And then from that, there was another one too. I remember there was 3 distinct things that I had. And then another one was, I remember the dream going that I was in this room, and suddenly all these people it's just like a big white blank room, and all of a sudden all these like people just kind of starting popping in out of nowhere, and all I could see was the back of their heads, and as I'm standing there, it's just like more and more people start showing up, and then they start looking at me. But I realize that nobody has faces, just, you know, just blank. So kind of creepy already. But then they all turn to one direction. So, you know, I go and follow to see what they're looking at, and I make my way through the crowd, and then I get up to the front and I see a coffin. You know, I walk up to the coffin, and when I get there, I see that I'm actually the one laying in the coffin, and wake up. Now, with these, I will mention, because I was just talking about insomnia, so you're like, oh, but you said you weren't sleeping. Well, these were happening in that little short 15-minute. These were the things that, when I would ever fall asleep, this is the stuff that would pop in my head and would wake me back up. So this is why I wasn't sleeping. Those were just 2 that I can still remember, but it was always stuff like that was just creepy or scary or, you know, whatever you want to call it. And they would pop in my head, and I'd wake back up. So, you know, I would fall asleep, and within that 15-minute span, that would be where I'd have one of these dreams, one of these things to shoot me awake. On top of that, I would have kind of the, you know, the one that I've heard before, that, you know, you think you hear people calling your name. That one I definitely had, where I would be sleeping, and it would sound like literally someone was standing right over me and just screaming, just "Doc!" And, you know, and I would jump up, of course, and, you know, look around, and I'd be confused, and I would be looking for someone. I wouldn't see anyone. I'm just scared to death because I think that, you know, one of my guys is in trouble. They're hurt. And I'd jump up and be in my room, and I'd look around and be just completely out of sorts. I'd get up. I would actually go through my entire room. I don't know if I ever woke my roommate up. I don't think I did. If I did, he never said anything to me, but you know, I'd go through the entire room, and I would just look, and I'd look everywhere. I'd look in the bathroom. Now, this is in the barracks room, keep in mind, so it's not like a big place. I couldn't even tell you how big it was, but, you know, as far as square footage or anything like that. But it was pretty tiny. So it didn't take me long to do this, but obviously it just scared the crap out of me because I think somebody's hurt. I get up, can't see, you know, it's just, oh, you're in your room, no problem. Well, once that happens, there was no way I was getting back to sleep. So that was another issue as far as sleeping and not being able to, and obviously I'm not sleeping, so that's making all the symptoms get worse because now I'm tired and I'm just dead on my feet every day. When it came to anger, I was just getting so explosively mad at stuff that was just for no reason whatsoever. One of the stories that I will tell people that have asked me about this in the past, there was actually one of the new medics that had come in after we got back from the deployment, and he came up to me, and all he did was he asked me for a pen, and I lost my shit. I mean, I flipped out on this guy, you know, just, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why don't you have a pen? You're supposed to be prepared. You're not fucking prepared. You need to get your shit together. You know, that kind of stuff. And again, just for a pen, you know, in reality, we did. I mean, the uniforms, you have little pin pockets. We were medics, so I think it was stressed a little bit more that we needed to have something to write with. So me personally, I always had, there's like 3 little slots on your sleeve, so I had a pen in every single one of those slots, and then I usually kept an extra one actually with the notebook that I kept. So I actually always had 4 on me, and the fact that this guy didn't have 1 on him just completely pissed me off. But again, something so stupid. So it's, you should be prepared, don't get me wrong. I mean, in the military, it really is, you need to be prepared, and that's probably why it did piss me off so much. But the level of anger that I had because of this was way out of proportion. I even recognized it at that point. I mean, not in the middle of it, obviously, but after the fact, I was just like, holy shit, like, I just really went off on this guy. Like, what the hell's wrong with me? Why am I, what the hell? And then plenty of times where, again, I'd be in the barracks room and I would just suddenly break down in tears, just bawling, and I had no idea why. It would just be like, man, what the hell? Like, I just can't stop. And some of the nights when I would be drinking, and I had actually called my mom, and I wouldn't even remember some of these. And I don't think it was because, like, I'm blackout drunk and I don't remember it, because, I never really drank like that in the barracks, at least, in the barracks room. Out with the boys, a little bit different story. But in the barracks room, it was like, oh yeah, I might have 1 or 2, whatever. I do remember a conversation where I talked to my mom, and then she called and asked me about it the next day, and she said that I was really upset because I felt like I hadn't done enough, I didn't save enough people, I didn't help them enough, and just that I was, I guess that I was just a failure at my job of being a medic, and so I was just losing it over this, just so completely distraught over it. So I mean, those are some of the things that were happening before I realized what was going on. And at the time, one of my buddies that he was, me and him had grown up in the Army together. What I mean by that is we went to basic training together, we went to medic school together, and then we both got stationed at the same place. We were in the medical platoon together. And I'm trying not to use anybody's full names, just because I don't want, if they don't want to be included in this, then that's okay. But so his name was Mike, and so Mike I used to hang out with all the time. He's a little bit older than me. It was always kind of seemed like I was almost like a little brother situation thing. I don't know, we were buddies, but that's just how it was. And and I was telling him about some of this stuff going on, and most people I wouldn't tell about this, because that was another thing, feeling very lost in this, because to me there was something wrong with me, and it wasn't happening to any of the guys that I had deployed with. And I was in a platoon, there was 30 of us, counting myself, so out of 30 guys, and I'm the only one that this is affecting. So I'm really worried, like, man, what's going on? Why am I the only one feeling this way? And if one of those, like, times when I would suddenly start to cry or something when I was on duty, or we were out training or whatever, obviously I'd play off, oh I got something in my eye, guys, oh, the wind's just blowing dust in my face. And I was usually able to cover it pretty well. But so I was telling Mike about this, and he had already went in, and he had actually already been talking to one of the psychiatrists. I'm not sure if he actually had been diagnosed with PTSD at that point, but he pretty well knew that that's what was coming. So when I was telling him all this, he says, hey, Ryan is like, man, that's the same stuff that's going on with me. You really should go in and talk to somebody about this. So I listened to him, and I went in and talked to the psych that was there, and she ended up just saying, well, why don't you come in and we'll have some sessions, and we'll see what's going on. They're always very slow. And she even told me that we don't like to just hurry up and slap a label PTSD on there, which is good. Obviously you don't want that, and then it kind of feels like they're just brushing it off. But that was so it was like a continued thing. Luckily at that point was right when it was about my rotation turn to go to the hospital. All the medics, you would spend a month where you would go up and you had your rotation at the hospital, where you just did your work at the hospital every day, as opposed to in the medical platoon. So mine was coming up, so luckily I was right there. I was just down the hall from her, so I was able to just kind of, whenever it was time for my appointments, go and talk to her, which I was meeting with her at once a week at that point. And so, like I said, luckily that came up, because then I was able to hide it a little bit more. Again, there's a maybe not so much now, a little bit still, but you know, at that point it was still really a big stigma on PTSD. You know, I didn't want to look weak. I didn't want to look like there's something wrong with me, like I was, you know, giving up, whatever it may be. And not to mention, at that time there was a lot of talk about people, you know, faking that they had PTSD so that they could get out of the Army early, so that they could get disability, whatever the reasons were. So, you know, and that was another one too. It's like, man, I don't want people to look at me like, hey, I'm trying to get out. I'm trying to, you know, like, this is my way. I'm trying to pull something over on the Army, you know. And with that, that's where so I should mention, and that's kind of a historical thing. So, you know, you go all the way back to like World War I, and they used to, when guys would have these issues, they used to call it shell shock. And at that time, that's what it was looked down on. It was looked at, there was something wrong with you, or that you were a coward because you were having these feelings and they didn't know what was going on. You know, and then as through the years it got a little bit better. You know, you get all the way into, it started changing around World War II a little bit. And when I'm talking about treatment, this is like back when, hey, there's something wrong with you, we're going to do electric shock. You know, we're going to, let's, you know, zap your head, see if that makes you right. I was reading an article just a little bit earlier today where they were shocking this guy's, the back of his throat. So they're putting these metal rods or something in the back of his mouth and shocking him because he wasn't able to talk. It was his PTSD, or shell shock as they called it then, was so bad that he wasn't talking anymore. They tried putting out cigarettes on his tongue. They, you know, just really like messed up, sounds like torturous kind of shit. And, you know, so it was really messed up at that point. But through the years it gets a little bit better. You know, by the time Vietnam came around, they started actually recognizing that, hey, you know, this is kind of one of the psychoses, I think is how you say it, of war. You know, it's like, oh, well, you know, these guys are seeing some pretty terrible things, and, you know, maybe it does make sense that people kind of have an issue with that. You know, seeing friends shot and people killed and blown up and all this horrible stuff, yeah, it makes sense. So in Vietnam, they started getting better with it. And then, you know, eventually we've gotten to where we're at today. But, you know, it took a while to get to that. So, you know, with me, like I said, it's still that stigma because I just, you know, nobody wants to look weak. I definitely, you know, didn't want anybody to think of me like as being a coward, because I was having these thoughts. So, you know, trying to really deal with it without anybody noticing. Gets a little bit harder when you start having to have appointments with a psychiatrist every week, but, you know, doing the best I can. And at that point, the medical platoon sergeant, he fully believed that I was trying to pull something to get out of work, get out of the medical platoon, whatever it was, I mean, yeah, it was just, he fully believed it. And at that point, I didn't really care for the platoon sergeant as it was anyway for other reasons, but, you know, it was just kind of one of those things, like, that's just kind of the leader that he was, where, oh, you know, you've been doing a good job, but now you come back and suddenly, hey, you must be trying to get out of something. So, you know, that's just how he looked at it, that we were always trying to pull something, get out of whatever, get out of PT, get out of duty, whatever it was. You know, I mean, he used to get mad because I didn't like being in the medical platoon, because it was, I'd like actually in the, you know, in the, like, the building, that's what I'm talking about, not, you know, being a medic. I love being a medic, but I wanted to be a line mech, so I wanted to be with my guys. So I was constantly, hey, they're going out on training. I need to go out there with them. We're a team. Those are my guys. I train with them. I deployed with them. I'm not deploying with the medical platoon. So I was always trying to get out to do that, and I was just always bored when I was back in the medical building in the aid station and that. So, like I said, just me and him, we never really butted heads because he was senior leadership, and I'm not going to talk back to the guy or anything, but it did kind of seem like it went that way a lot of just stuff. But whatever. Other than that, so I started going to these appointments, and things just kept getting worse as far as my signs and symptoms. There was a day when I was doing working at the computer, doing my work for the day on putting in entries and stuff like that. Basically, it was just like I was doing the intake for soldiers that would come in and see the doctors, and I suddenly had just a very vivid, very lucid flashback where I was not in that office. I was in Iraq. I was looking around, and all I could see was streets of Iraq. I didn't see the office anymore. I was fully immersed into this flashback. And I started getting hot. I felt like I was back in the Iraq heat, and I just couldn't figure out what the hell. And as far as all the flashback was just patrolling, just walking down the street with the platoon. But then when I snapped out of it, I felt like I was hot. Like when I came out of it, I was sweating, sweating profusely, like I was sitting in Iraq back in 120, 130 degree heat. And I walked down the hallway to one of the women that I would. She wasn't the psychiatrist, but I would meet with her sometimes, so she knew what was going on. And I found her, and I was like, "Hey, I don't know what's going on, but I'm burning up, and something's happening. I don't know what this is." And luckily she was cool about it, and so I went into her office. She's like, "Hey, no, you can come in here. That's fine." I took off my fatigue top and just sat there, and I sat under the desk because suddenly I felt very just vulnerable, because now not only am I having all this stuff, but none of my guys are there with me, and that's the thing. You feel very protected when you're in that platoon of guys. You have them all watching out for you, and now here I am, and I'm alone in this, and I'm having this flashback, and I don't know what to do. So that was one I was freaking out, for lack of a better term. I was panicked. So I did go. I remember that, going in her office and just sitting there for I don't know, maybe half an hour or something like that. So just another one of the symptoms that happened. And as that went on, did get to the point of where they actually diagnosed me with PTSD. So then they started doing the treatments. With those treatments, all sorts of things. And just some statistics, a little bit that I did look up for you guys for this. So right now, and I'm not sure if the numbers have increased or decreased, probably, well, I don't know what the numbers have done since when I was actually in, but right now it's 13.8% of servicemen and women in the Army have PTSD or get PTSD. And with that, with the PTSD, that comes down to, I'm sure everybody's heard there's the big movement, but 22 vets commit suicide every single day. So that's a huge number. That's unreal. I hate to hear that, because that is, every day is a lot. The therapies that they started doing. So with that, there's a lot of differences in the therapies that they do, and that's because with PTSD, it's just a ever-changing, evolving just monster that comes along with it. So there's just the changing symptoms. With the changing symptoms, there has to be changing therapies. So they're always changing. They're always trying something else. They haven't really come up with a perfect one. So that's where it's one of those ever evolving things, which makes it makes treatment a little harder. So they started putting me into different types of therapies. The very first thing they did was, of course, put me on meds, and hey, you need antidepressants, and you need stuff to help you sleep. And even that in itself is a tough combination that for them to figure out. They have to start seeing what's going to work for you, what's not going to work for you. Everybody's a little bit different. It took a while for them to get mine under control. Even after I was out of the Army, before they finally figured that out. But at the time that I was still in the Army, so they started doing different therapies other than just me meeting with the psychiatrist every week, which that continued the rest of the time. I can't remember the very first ones that they did, but they basically have two different types, and there's exposure therapy, and then there's cognitive therapy. So exposure therapy is when they try to make you relive the situation and thus make it less severe of an event. And then cognitive therapy is more of they're trying to change, not change, but they're trying to have you help change your way of thinking on things, and basically try and get rid of the bad thoughts or the thoughts that don't help you. So the first one that I remember, other than obviously the ongoing regular appointments, was they put me in this class, and this class was a month long, and 3 months long, or maybe it is a month. No, I'm sorry, I can't remember. It was a month long, so 3 weeks, and every single day you go to this class. And in this class, which actually that alone helped a lot, just because for the longest time it was just because I felt alone. There was nobody else going through it. It was only me, even though, like I mentioned before, my buddy Mike, he was going through it, but that was one of those things that wasn't really helpful when we're both going through this, and we're both in this very severe state of PTSD, that we're both going through it. So us hanging out and both talking about it, it wasn't really helping at that point, because we were just so in our heads about it, and it was, we were just helping each other relive it, and it just wasn't helping. So this class did help, because I get in there, and there was I think like 26 guys or so in there, 20 something, and so then immediately I say, oh well, hey, here's 26 other people that they have the same stuff going on as me. So that alone shows me, hey, all right, I'm not the only one. I'm not alone in this. And then what was going on in the class was, they had every day was something a little different. They would talk about, there was a sleep class trying to help with your sleep. There was a class about eating, because most people, when they go into this, or I should say some of the guys, they'll start gaining weight because they'll start eating a lot. Luckily that was never one that I had any issues with, or they won't eat, or they'll stop eating. I never messed with my, if I wanted to eat less or more or anything like that. They had the change your way of thinking class. That was, like I said, the cognitive therapy, where they would go through and kind of help you recognize any of the bad thoughts or choices or the things that you were doing. They had a exposure therapy, where basically you started off where you wrote down the worst event that you could think of, the thing that seemed to bother you the most, and then you read it out loud to the group, you read it out loud to yourself. So every single day they wanted you to relive this moment, to try and make it seem like not a big deal. And for that, it was first, it's kind of hard to pinpoint one thing when you're in that moment. And why I say that, so just so you guys know, some of those things that I saw that I'm talking about, there was the very first thing I saw was some Iraqi police that had been attacked and been blown up. They had this guy in an ambulance already, so we were actually at the Iraqi hospital, and the guy had his head all bandaged up, and they were like, hey, can you look at him and see what you think? Oh, and he's brain dead, which is weird. It's just like, oh, he just saw him. What do you mean he's brain dead? And but yeah, I go and look, and sure enough, the guy's just missing like half of his head. So it's pretty, that alone is bad. But then there's also, there's massacre sites where we walked up and you could literally see the blood splatters on the wall, from where the insurgents and the extremists had lined up these people and just massacred them, just firing squad. And those lines, it wasn't like, hey, yeah, nice straight and across. They went up and down because there were kids there too, so they were massacring kids the same way. And with kids, I hate how it always seemed to be me that got the kids. And I don't know what it was, but I just always seemed to be that I got all the really hurt kids, kids that have been burned up from IEDs. One kid came to the outpost that we were at. Dad wanted me to look at him, and I go to look at this kid, and he had a huge gash, like right down the side, or right down the middle of his head. And when I say gash, I'm talking he had a hole in his skull from this IED that had gone off, a piece of shrapnel, whatever, I have no idea what it was, but it had literally gouged a hole through his head. And when I looked, I could see his brain. So it had carved through his skull, because when I looked at the top of this kid's head, I could see his brain. And he was awake. So, this isn't like in a hospital. The kid was awake. All that he had over this was he had a cloth bandage that had been taped down. So as soon as I see this, warning bells are going off in my head, like, holy shit, his brain is exposed to the outside, to the elements and all this. And the kid was paralyzed on one side of his body. It was on his left side, just wasn't working at all. And the dad was asking, or telling me, it doesn't work. Can you fix him? Can you make it so he's normal again? Well, if you know anything about brain injuries, the hemispheres, they cross. So if the right side is damaged, then the left side won't work, and vice versa. So, and that's where it was. This gouge was on the right side of his head. So right away I knew, yeah, he had brain damage, and he probably wasn't going to ever get that back. And this dad's asking me to be the one to fix him and to save him and to help his son. And that's a terrible burden that you have on you, but I was a medic. That's what I was there for. I was there to help. So I did everything I could. I cleaned up the area around the wound as best I could, and I gave him better bandaging. Still not what this kid needed for having a giant hole in his head. And then the worst of it, which I identify as the worst thing for me, was actually after one of the suicide bombers. There were multiple, and you go through that and you're seeing body parts all over the place. You're seeing hands and feet and legs. The feet still have shoes on them, because this is real life. When something gets blown off, it's not like, oh, and all the clothes are gone, or the shoes are gone. No. So the feet, still had shoes on these dismembered legs, and hands still had watches around them if they weren't blown off at the wrist or something. And after one of these suicide bombers, the first one actually that we came in contact with, we go over to help. It had happened in a different area, but we went out to kind of reacting to the call, and we got there and immediately start seeing all the just this horrible scene, blood everywhere, obviously. And then after we cleared the area, made sure there weren't any other bombs in that, we started talking to them. And there was obviously ambulances, police, all that they had around there. And while this was going on, there was a dump truck, and in this dump truck was where they were throwing all the body parts. And as I'm going around trying to help whoever I can that's there, anybody else that's injured, I started helping them to do this, because somebody asked me, I can't remember now. I'm pretty sure, at first I was pretty sure that my platoon sergeant, and this is my infantry platoon sergeant, which this one I got along with, so you guys don't get that confused. But at first, when this first all started happening, I remember trying to remember, did he ask me to do this, or and then but as I went through it, I realized that it was actually, he just said, hey, you can go help go help everybody and help fix anybody up. But one of the Iraqis had asked me to help them load this truck, basically, and help clean up. And so I'm going through, I'm picking up these limbs, these body parts, and I'm helping toss them into a dump truck. And one of the things that I ended up picking up was a little boy's head. And that's the moment, I think. That's the one that really sticks with me. I mean, obviously I remember all these other things, but that part, just picking up a little kid's head. And that's all it was, just his head. And I'm hopefully, some of you guys, this might be a little much for you, but hey, it is what it is. It's war. So these are the things that, medics see. And I want you guys to be aware of that and see why, because that's the kind of stuff you just don't. Most people go their whole lives without seeing, especially something that bad, but maybe nothing bad ever, So, but so here I am picking up this little kid's head, and I just remember seeing, looking into his eyes, and his eyes weren't fully cloudy yet. They always talk about, like, when someone dies, the eyes get that cloudiness. It had started, but it wasn't fully there. And and here I have to toss this little boy's head into this body part truck with everything else. Like, it's just a piece of garbage now, and I have no idea where the truck went. I'm assuming they buried them, but again, they weren't identifying these people. So maybe a mass grave. I don't know. I really don't know. So, pretty gruesome, terrible things that I saw while I was there. And the weird thing about the dump truck is, for the longest time, I didn't remember that. I did not remember that part of it. I remember, basically in my memory, I always remember doing the patrol, and then basically stopping for a minute to talk to a guy, when it was like, I don't know, I think it was the police chief with the platoon sergeant, and then getting back in the trucks and going. And I did not remember that part. One of the guys even asked me about it, and I flat out said, no, didn't even see it, which is just weird in itself, because it's like, how could you not see this massive dump truck sitting right next to where we were at? And I didn't remember it while I was there. Well, one of the things that they had me doing, as far as the therapy, was they had me seeing a different psychiatrist. They also had, as opposed to the Army one, they also had a civilian one that they had me go and see as well. And he did a treatment called EMDR, and I can't remember, I probably should have looked that up, I'm sorry, but what EMDR actually stands for. But basically, he had me sit in a chair. As I always say, it seems like it's a type of hypnosis, because he had me sit in a chair, think about the event, close my eyes, and then start tapping my leg, and just tapping with my finger. Just sit there and keep tapping it as I'm talking about it. And then he had me start telling the story, and as I go through it, he was kind of talking me through it almost, but mostly just listening to what I was saying. And then in that moment, whatever it was, the tapping, the talking about it, something, but in that moment, that memory came rushing back in. I immediately started hyperventilating. I got, felt hot again. I started sweating. I started panicking. I immediately just tears flying. And it all came rushing back to me in a split second. And my very first thought, I still remember this, was, I can't believe you did this to me. And blaming the psychiatrist. Because to me, I was like, my own psyche, my brain knew that this was a traumatic event and that I would have to slowly handle it over time. And suddenly this guy, the psychiatrist, he was the one. It was his fault. He brought this out and made me remember this horrible, horrible thing. So I was pissed. I was just so pissed off at him for, making me remember that moment. And yeah, it was just, it's so amazing to be like what your psyche can do, like that, because it was just complete blank. Even in my journal that I was keeping at that time, I mean, like, I have it written out exactly my thoughts, what I wrote down for that day, and did not mention that at all. So the fact that it was completely blanked out, and maybe that's why my mind knew better, that in that moment while I was deployed, that it wasn't time for me to deal with that stuff. And that's usually what they say in that moment. When I was deployed, I never felt depressed. I never, felt sad about this stuff. I mean, maybe a little bit. It wasn't like didn't have any empathy. I felt bad for them, but not on the level once I had PTSD. Not that same level of it. And that's just it. You can't sit there and think about that stuff in that moment, because you're at war, and if you turn into a mess in that situation, that's when it not only gets deadly for you, but the guys that that are trusting you. And again, I'm the one medic. I was responsible for my whole platoon, so that's 30 guys counting myself that I'm responsible for. I'm the medic for them. So it's not like I would even be able to sit there and think about this stuff or deal with it in that moment as it was anyway. So that was part of that therapy, and then going on with the exposure therapy within that class. Once, as we got into it, another one, probably the main thing that helped me the most with that class, the thing that I, at least, when I think back on it, the thing that helped me the most was with the exposure therapy. They had us go out. It was basically like our little class field trip. We would get in some vans, and they started taking us out into the community. So off base, going into places with big crowds, because at that time crowds drove all of us insane. We didn't feel safe in the crowds, again, because we were so used to having that group, having a platoon behind you, that many people looking out for you. And now you're back in the States, back in the real world. They're not there anymore, and you feel completely alone and helpless, that it's you against the world. And this is how you feel after going into a country like Iraq, or if guys that have been to Afghanistan, and they just went into these very violent places. It's something that's I can't even explain it if you haven't been there. Most people, they don't see how the rest of the world really is, and how bad some of this stuff is. And you want to talk about oppression, and this is that's a whole nother level of oppression. So you just come back from a place with that, and now you're back in the States alone, without your group, without your platoon, without your guys with you. So you feel, like I said, very vulnerable. So the class, in order to combat that, had us start going on these field trips. And we started off small. The first one is like, all right, well, let's just go, I forgot what it was. It was just like a store. It might have been a gas station. Some fairly small store, like right outside the base. That was the starting place. And we were going together. That was their thing. Like, well, you guys are still going as a group. You're just a group in this class. So, we went to this gas station, and we're like, okay, well, it's uncomfortable, but all right. And then next week it was, all right, let's ramp it up a little bit. Now we're going to go to Walmart, a lot more people. And then now it's like, all right, now I'm really nervous. And once we went to Walmart, they also had us, instead of sticking in one big group, they had us do the buddy system. It's like, all right, well, now just two of you hang out, and you guys walk around and all this. And and they said right away, of course, all of us did exactly what they expected us to do, and that was, well, we split up, and then we all ended up meeting in one spot, and we kind of got back into that group mechanic. And they're like, no, you can't do that, split back up, just two of you, just keep walking around, you'll see each other. And that was the thing. It was almost like we figured out the pattern of, all right, if we two of us go this way, and then the other two go this way, and then two others are coming back that way, then we'll make sure that it's like, yep, see, you're just seeing the group, seeing the other groups wherever it is. So then the last place that we ended up going to was a giant mall out in Nashville, and I don't remember the name of the mall, but it just absolutely massive. So now, we're really on high alert because now you have multiple levels. That was one that really bothered me. Just with like having the hypervigilance and being aware of everything. That one, I'll do an entire episode on that because it's a totally different feeling, and I don't want to try and get that all into this one, so this podcast isn't too ridiculously long. But so now we're in this mall, and same thing. They're like, well, let's do a buddy system and then come back here in like half an hour. So we do that. We're somewhat walking around this mall. None of us were moving too fast because we didn't want to get too out into the masses. And then we come back and they say, all right, well, now we're going to be here for another hour, and you guys are going to split up and you're going to go by yourselves. And that was a nightmare at that time. Again, this is still when everything's just very fresh, very raw. All these things are happening right now, and that was bad. But I do feel like in the long run, it probably did help because they were having us, forcing us to do these things that made us uncomfortable. Like I was saying in my past podcast, forcing yourself to do it. This is where they first taught me that and got me started on doing that, just to force yourself into those situations that are uncomfortable. And that was extremely uncomfortable. So that was that class. Things, again, multiple different treatment therapies, trying to figure out, try and do the best they can to help us. And after that, it was just basically going back to the regular psychiatric appointments. After I got out of the Army, because it was shortly after that, and I was still having major anger issues, and getting out of the Army is not that one drives most people to anger in and of itself, because it's a pain in the ass going around getting all your gear turned back in, and you have to go to a bunch of different classes and get signed off, and you're just cows being herded around like, all right, go here, go here, go here, go here. So that's an annoying and just painful experience in itself. So now I'm doing it while I'm having all these anger issues and depression and sadness and everything. But then I got out, and just that's where things, I get home, and at first most of that stuff went away, and I think it was just because I was so just overjoyed to be out of this scenario where these things were bothering me. And one of the things I didn't mention too, so like even helicopters, the sound of helicopters flying overhead would just freak me the hell out. And I didn't know why. Because I never, I was like, oh, well, I don't know why helicopters bother me. I mean, that's how we would travel around from certain places, and we rode in helicopters and all that. But I was like, I don't know why these are freaking me out so much. That was one of the other things I forgot to mention. I was talking about the things you see. When I was coming back to Iraq after my mid-tour leave, we were flying back out to the post at night, and as we're flying, all of a sudden I see just this bright flash go shooting right down all the windows of, we were in a Chinook, so big long helicopters, the ones with the dual blades on them, for anybody that doesn't know. And right away I'm like, what the hell was that? And I see this backdoor gunner just, he's looking around, just doing all this stuff. You can see him swinging this gun every which way. And then we landed out in the middle of some field somewhere. And sure enough, we found out later that we had just been hit by an RPG. So somebody out in wherever we were flying over saw the helicopter and decided they were going to shoot us down. And with whatever luck that we all had, this thing, the actual rocket, hit the side of the helicopter, but it hit it at an angle so that it just kind of glanced off. So if it hits this, instead of exploding, it just hit and shot off the side. That's what the spark was that went flying down the side of it. So very close, very easily, I could have been killed right then and there. whether from the blast or from the fact that I'm going to be in a helicopter crash, and wherever I land, if somebody's out there waiting for me, depending on who it is that just tried to shoot us down. So years and years later, I actually just made that connection only a few months ago when I was doing my first lecture at the school. It just suddenly popped in my head and kind of had a little revelation right there in the middle of the class. So that was another thing too. Just the sound of helicopters just bothers the shit. Now it's not so bad. I still, if I hear them, I immediately kind of look around like, hey, what's going on? Who's that? What's happening? But not on the level that it used to be. And then, so like I said, once I got home, luckily just that overwhelming happiness to be home, I think kind of got rid of a few of those things at first, but unfortunately they came rushing back. So me and my girlfriend at the time started having a lot more issues because I was distant, I was angry, I was sad, and all over the place. At this point, they still hadn't gotten my meds right, so I was really dealing with trying to figure out this med dosage. And it was just a hard struggle because with the sleep meds alone, one would put me to sleep but wouldn't keep me asleep. Another one, if I could manage to fall asleep, I would, but it wouldn't knock me out. So most of the time I still wouldn't be sleeping. I finally found one for that. Well, then with that, there's also the antidepressants. So they're trying to figure out which one to go with. And one second, I need a drink here. So with that, they're trying to figure this out. And it started basically going into, well, this one's not doing anything, this one's making me not feel anything, this one's all over the place. And eventually it was just so many emotions every which way, going everywhere, that I just said, you know what, screw it. Like, I just don't want to feel anything. I'm sick of having all these emotions. I don't want to feel a damn thing. So I started saying, yeah, this one's good, when they got me on the one that just made me completely emotionally numb. I felt nothing. I just didn't care about anything. So obviously you can see how that would lead to problems with a girlfriend where, sitting there hanging out, and it's just, I just didn't care. I didn't care that she was there. I didn't care about what she was saying. Oftentimes if I'd be sitting there watching TV with a roommate, he would be talking to me. I wouldn't even hear him. I just completely spaced out, and all of a sudden he'd be like, hey, did you hear? And it's like, no, I didn't hear what you were saying. And I didn't care. I didn't care that I didn't hear what he was saying. I didn't care what he was talking about. I didn't care what the day-to-day was going to be. It was just and then in the moment it was better to me than having to deal with all the sadness, all the anger. But pretty quickly I started realizing that I was starting to get angry again, and now I'm starting to get angry because I don't feel anything. So back to the drawing board of trying to figure out the meds. They kept working on meds. They finally did find a combination that actually worked for me. And all this time when I say they, I'm talking about going to the VA now, because with me being out, I would go in and see the VA doctors with the therapies that they did there. So, and continuing kind of with the I guess that falls on the exposure therapy, they would have me still do the same thing of talk about the event. So talk about that suicide bomber over and over and over again. And it wasn't helping. It was just pissing me off. It's like, people keep trying to make me relive this moment, the worst moment of my life, and you want me to just think about it every single time. It's like, that's the whole problem, is that this happened. I don't want to think about it. Why would you? Why would you want to think about the worst thing ever? But that's what they wanted me to do. They started having me record myself on just like a little tape recorder thing, and then play it back and listen to myself talk. And it's really weird because I still have it. I haven't listened to it in a while. Hopefully I still have it from when we moved. But listening to it's just like, holy crap, it doesn't even sound like me. And you can just hear the depression, the down. You just sound like that beaten dog or whatever. Just like, I'm very quiet, and it just like there's just nothing to me. It sounds like it sounds like there's nothing there. and I mean, like my soul is gone. I don't know how to describe it, but you can hear it definitely. So they had me do that. At the time, it was a video conference call that they were having me do this with a psychiatrist, because the closest, she was all the way out in Wisconsin, and this is when I'm in Rockford, Illinois. So it was too far of a trip for me to drive out there all the time. So they just had the video call, but so that was like one of the therapies that was going on with that. During all of that, they started to, well, they talked to me about it, and so they were asking me, of course, do you think about suicide? Do you think about killing yourself? And I always say no, I don't have, don't have suicidal thoughts, but I would tell them I wish I was dead. I don't want to kill myself, but I just wish something would happen. I was constantly like, I wish I would just get in a car accident and I would be gone. Some freak accident would happen, and I would just be dead. It would be done and over with, but I wasn't going to be the one to do it. So the car accident was like the one I was constantly just like hoping that I would get in a car accident and that it would just be done and over with. And the psychiatrist at the time, he said, well, he's like, oh, okay, he's like, well, it's good that, obviously good that you're not suicidal, but at the same time, he's like, well, what you have is called a passive death wish, because I did want to be dead, but I wasn't going to do anything about it. And that was, so that was then. Eventually I would get, it's weird to say, but I guess slightly suicidal. The thoughts definitely started coming in, I guess is the best way to put that. And I'll probably talk about that a little bit more in a different episode as well. But yeah, so those were things that were happening. And I just didn't feel, I just wasn't myself. And after years and years of going through all this stuff, well, and at the same time too, another one where I was like forcing myself to do things because I hated just sitting at the house not doing anything. So I did enroll in school. I went and got my vet tech degree. It was basically, I started working in a vet office, because I wanted something to do, something to just occupy my time, which was weird. It was basically, I was doing this degree, assuming because in the back of my head I knew that I wanted to work towards something, but I can very clearly remember thinking none of this matters because I'm going to be dead, or hopefully I'm dead, and none of this really matters. But again, it was that forcing myself to be into those uncomfortable things and just forcing myself to do something. And eventually that did help, that I was giving myself something to do, whether it was working or it was going to school. And I was doing both. I was, working during the day, and I was taking night classes for that. So, gave myself something to do, and still doing the best I could at, having a life of whatever I could. Me and my girlfriend did eventually break up because of that, because I was getting so bad, and it was all completely on me because I ended up pushing her away. I could see that I was getting bad, and I didn't want to bring her through that. So I was just, I was trying to push everyone and anybody away from me, because I just didn't want. I knew that I was turning into that, or I felt at least, I felt that I was turning into that toxic person, and I just didn't want anybody that I cared about around me at that point. That was one of the things, but also there's a whole big thing. She wanted to live in the city, and I knew, again, did not want to be around people. So living in Chicago sounds like an absolute nightmare to someone in that thought, and I mean, even now, I'm not exactly a huge fan of going into the city, just because it's chaotic. Anybody that's been to any major city knows what it's like. So, even going to Chicago now, even when I am at a lot better terms with all of this, and I'm still kind of like, oh man, we got to deal with Chicago driving and people and traffic and everything. But especially back then, that was just absolute, like, well, hell, well, I don't feel like moving to hell, thank you. So that on top of, but we did end up breaking up, which I felt like I was doing it for at that time, like, her protection, or not protection, I guess, but to protect her from what was to having to see me go through this, and again because of moving in the city and all that. But So it was almost like I was happy to get her and anybody else that I had pushed away out of that situation, but at the same time I was basically starting to seclude myself, which is not good. Luckily, I don't know how much I tried to push away family and friends, but luckily, again, I have really close family and really good friends, so it didn't push them away. If anything, it was maybe that I probably just didn't hang out as much as I used to, that I normally would have, as far as when it comes to friends and stuff. So luckily that didn't actually work on any of them. And that's just kind of how it went. Just kind of, it was really a day-to-day thing, day-to-day figuring it out and struggling and pushing through this stuff and just really trying to come to terms with it. That's why I hate to say it, but because it's so cliche, but the time will heal all wounds. And when it comes to this, at least, I'd have to say that it's right. And I know anybody that's dealing with it, they don't want to hear that, because it's not, when you feel like that, you don't want it to take time. And again, this is going on 10 years for me. You don't want it to take 10 years to feel better in that situation. You don't want to take 10 years of trying to push through this and force yourself to do things you don't want to do, to feel depressed, to feel nothing, to feel lonely, all those things. You don't want it to take 10 years. You want it to be done and over with. You want to be the person that you used to be, and you want it to happen now. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. So anybody that's watching this, and I hope you weren't expecting me to tell you, like, hey, here's the magical way and you'll be good to go, and the old take 2 of these and call me in the morning. Sorry, they don't have that. But again, hopefully you see with me talking about this stuff that you can get through it. You just have to you have to keep fighting it. You have to find people that are going to help you through with it, friends, family, whoever. Talking to a psychiatrist, just talking to anybody. You got to just keep pushing through it. It does get better. With me, it was slowly but surely got better. You have to find those things that make you happy, those things that make it okay. I started, when I did want to seclude myself, I did find out that I needed to get away from people. And luckily at the time, the next girlfriend that I had, she was what we all call the, well, I won't say her name, but we all called her the hippie, because she was very much a nature lover. She wanted to be out walking, hiking, all that stuff. And that's exactly what I ended up needing at that time. I started going out. We would walk through the woods and just listen. We wouldn't talk or anything at that moment. We would just walk and enjoy the woods, enjoy nature. I would go out. I bought a kayak and I started going out, and I would just paddle myself to the middle of the lake that I used to go to all the time, and just away from anybody. And I would just lay back in my kayak and just be secluded and just listen to the sounds. And that's just what I needed. I needed to get away from all the noise at that time. And that's kind of the thing, you don't want to seclude yourself totally, but like that, it worked out, because I could get away for a minute, collect my thoughts, take a deep breath, and then come back to it. Then come back, go to class that night, go to work the next day. So you just got to find those things that work for you. Anybody that's been watching the other podcasts that I do, I still play video games, because it's one of those things that it gets me out of it. I watch movies, I read, I watch anime, all these things, because it's stuff that is enjoyable. If you listen to the Omni Lucid Group cast, we were talking about how those things have stories and better or worse and ideas, and it's just the things that you enjoy are really is really what's going to help you through. You still have to force yourself to do those things that you enjoy. They might not be enjoyable right now, depending where you're at with all of this, but eventually you'll get back there. You'll get back to that point where, hey, this is fun. I do like doing this. With me, it kept going. With hippie, it was me and her. We broke up, and I didn't date again until I met my wife, and that's where I'm at now. I got married. we have a house, we have dogs. I feel a lot better than what I was. Obviously, I still deal with this stuff, but you know, all the, I guess, the severeness of it, it does get better and goes away. You know, as long as you're willing to work at it, it will. You have to confront those demons. You do. That's, you know, especially if you are someone that, you know, like I said, this is me talking about like the military stuff. And if you were a soldier, they teach you that, you know, don't give up on the fight, never quit, just keep fighting, keep working at it. You know, you're gonna get knocked down, get back up, and just, you know, say fuck you and keep moving forward. I mean, that's just it. You have to go out there and just prove to, you know, whoever, whether it's yourself, prove to the illness that you're not going to be knocked down and taken out by this, that you're going to get better, you're going to overcome it. And you can overcome it. Anybody can. You just have to keep working at it. Find the people that you need to help you with this. If you need to talk to me about it, you know what? Send me a message and I'll talk to you about it. That's the whole point of this, is that you can find somebody to help you through it, to get through it, keep fighting, keep pushing through it. You know, it's hard, it's tough. A lot of people, they just, you know, they will give up, they'll get down and all that. I'm sure there were days when I basically just gave in and I lost that day. But you know what? You just get back up and try it again the next day. You just got to keep pushing. You just don't, you know, just don't hit your that clock out card. You know, it's not time to punch out. You just got to keep moving with it. And yeah, and I really hope, if you are somebody that feels that stuff, I really hope you do contact me or somebody, anybody, to help you with it, because I'm living proof. I can tell you. I know it's tough. I know it's hard. It's stuff you got to do. I just went through and told you guys some of these horrible things that I saw, and that's, I mean, the few that I recalled right there just talking about this, that's only some of it. There are a lot of bad things. I'm lucky enough that I never had one of the guys with me get killed in front of me. There were people that died, but luckily, and luckily is even a bad way to put it, but it didn't happen right in front of me. There are definitely other people where the best friend could be killed right in front of them, and usually in a bad way that it just scars you for the rest of life. So definitely keep going through it. It's the best I can say. Just keep pushing. Don't give into it. Don't let the illness win. Show that you're better than it, that you're stronger than it. You can be stronger than it. If you might need some help, and that's okay. People need help. Whether if you need people to talk to, that's completely fine. Don't make the mistake like I did and get too proud about it, to go and talk to a psychiatrist, to talk to your friends. They might suggest taking meds. If that's what you need, then that's what you need. I don't want anybody to go out and just get completely knocked out and just completely reliant on it, because that's something I've been fighting with, is to get off of all these stupid meds, because I feel like I'm better and I'm to the point where I don't need them. But you know what? There's nothing wrong with asking help. Please do. Everybody needs help sometimes. Even you can be the biggest, baddest motherfucker in the army, and you still might need help. Everybody does. It's okay. It's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. It's it's a sign of strength to show that you're human. That that you can make mistakes too. Everybody does. Nobody's perfect. It's completely fine to ask for help. And you know what? You might just find out that people are happy that you did. People will be happy that you turn to them in your time of need. And you know what? Once you get better, then you can be that person's I don't know how to put it, that person's guy to turn to, guy, lady, whatever, to turn to when they need help. You can do, that's what I'm trying to do now. I needed help, I asked for help, I got it. I'm better now, and now I'm trying to do that for anybody that's watching this. I'm trying to be that person that you can lean on, because down to my bones, I still very much am that line medic, that I'm out there to save. I'm out there to save and help people. You know, I don't want to see anybody get hurt or go down or, you know, give in on it. So I might not be able to be there to literally pick you up, but I'm here to pick you up and help you out as best I can. So I really hope, like I said, I hope you get a hold of me. If you need someone and you don't have anybody to turn to, definitely get a hold of me. It's okay to ask for help. And you know what? Maybe I'm better to turn to anyway in this, because you don't know me, I don't know you. But you know what? If that's what you need, that's what you need. I won't ever stop being the medic. So that's just who I am. If you are military and you're infantry or you're a soldier, then don't ever stop being the soldier. Keep fighting. Why? That's what you did. That's what your job was. That's who you were. I know if your training was anything like me, it was ingrained into you. It was ingrained into every fiber of you. If you're not military, that's okay. You don't have to have that stuff ingrained in you for somebody to help you, to ask for help. You know, like I always say, I'm not trying to exclude anybody. Everybody needs help. It doesn't matter who you are, what kind of training you've been through, any of that. If you need help, ask for it, and I bet you can find somebody that will help you. So that's the PTSD episode. Hopefully you can find some help or comfort, whatever you're trying to get out of this. Hopefully you can find a little bit of it in this. Don't worry, this isn't the last episode. There's still a lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of stuff with PTSD. This one was just kind of my going over it broadly, because there is so much. And definitely, if you guys do have comments and I see them and you want me to discuss something, I'm more than happy to go through and just do an episode of answering people's questions. So once again, this is Ryan from Omnilucid Media for the Blackheart Paladin, and you know, the usual: subscribe, like, comment, share, all that fun stuff. And I'll talk to you next time. In the words of Bill and Ted, be excellent to one another.